Hi, Jeremy Crow here. This video I wanted to discuss the concept that we have somehow shifted into a new universe, or that maybe we have somehow traveled to a parallel Earth. And I wanted to bring up a few of these historical ideas that relate to that as well. But first, why is this a concept that's out there right now? I think the main source of this being in the Zeitgeist is mainly the Mandela Effect. So now if you haven't heard of the Mandela Effect, then where have you been? But just to briefly explain, it's when you have a very strong, precise, and meaningful memory of something happening in a certain way or being a certain way, and then you go and look it up and you find out it's never been like that. It's never been like that ever. And that's it. That's the Mandela Effect. And if you have one of these experiences, then you are Mandela affected, and you can consider yourself an ME, or the people that are in the Mandela Effect community. That's the terminology that they use. So one example, just so you really understand this, is Ed McMahon. So, do you remember Ed McMahon delivering oversized checks to the winners of the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes? If you do remember that, then you are an ME. You are Mandela affected, because that never happened. For one thing, Ed McMahon never worked for Publishers Clearinghouse, and he never delivered oversized checks to people's doors. Now, I'll just throw this out there. I'll just throw this into the video for fun. But to go a little deeper, there's a concept called a residue. Now, that is evidence that things actually did happen the way you remember them, even though history says that they didn't. So, one residue for this example would be a parody song that Ed McMahon himself participated in, where he went around to different houses and he asked for the check back. He said, "I'm gonna broke. Can I have the check back?" Which doesn't even make any sense if he didn't deliver oversized checks. So the joke doesn't even make any sense. So that is very strong residue of him actually delivering oversized checks. But look it up. He never did it, but he made a joke about taking them back. Another piece of residue for that same one is that what was it, that late night talk show that Ed McMahon was the sidekick on, the name Johnny Carson. So Johnny Carson, he goes and he's a guest on some other guy's show or something like that. He goes to visit some other guy and it's being recorded, and he brings an oversized check that says right on it, Publishers Clearinghouse. And he makes a joke. He goes, "Ed McMahon couldn't be here, but he wanted me to bring you this," or some other punchline like that. I can't remember exactly, but it says on the joke check, Publishers Clearinghouse, right on it. And he never worked for that company. Like I said, look it up. So that's another very powerful piece of residue for that. But anyways, one of the ways that people have tried to make sense of this is they said, well, maybe somehow we are in a new universe, and this new universe played out pretty much the same way as the universe that I came from, but there's a few subtle differences, including the fact that Ed McMahon worked for Publishers Clearinghouse and delivered oversized checks to people's houses didn't happen. That's one idea. Another idea is that we somehow shifted into a parallel universe, to a parallel Earth, like I said. Or another idea is that maybe something happened and it changed our past. So maybe there were time travelers that went in the past, they did something that made some subtle changes that rippled through, and some of us still have that memory of how it was before the change happened, because we lived through the original timeline. Another concept that can explain this, potentially, is that there was some great cataclysm some sort of global catastrophe or a very large catastrophe where a massive number of individuals died, and that we are experiencing the afterlife now. I think this is a very compelling idea because it just feels interesting. It feels weird, and a lot of the things that people remember wrong are degraded. And so it's almost like this reality that we somehow found ourselves in that is slowly degrading and is eventually going to fizzle out or something. And maybe that is the afterlife experience. I don't know. So SMQ has a YouTube channel, and he came out with this idea that we all died in 2012. And that was something that I'd been thinking of very obsessively almost about a year ago or so. And then I was doing some searches relating to it, and I found that SMQ had already put out a video detailing that concept. And so I got in touch with him, and I've been talking with him about it. But that's one of the other ideas. And there's actually a book by Robert Anton Wilson called Ubik, which is short for ubiquitous. And in that book, there's some really interesting concepts that could relate to this. And I don't want to give it away, but if you're interested in this topic in general, then I would suggest reading Ubik. It's a really cool book. I'll put a link in the description below so you can find it easy. But this idea that we all died in 2012 relates to another concept as well that is the Mayan apocalypse you may have heard of. The whole 2012 Mayan end of the long count calendar. So now what this concept was, I mean, it still exists, this concept, but the concept is that at the end of the Mayan long count calendar that the world would end. And people had all these different predictions, like there would be a massive pole shift, that there would be some sort of loss of the magnetosphere of the Earth, and that we'd be inundated with cosmic rays, and we'd all die or get damaged or severely mutated. Some people said that the planet Nibiru will come back to close orbit with Earth, and the aliens that are living on it will come reveal themselves to us again. The Anunnaki or something. There's all these ideas that were floating around. But really, if you look at what the Mayans said about 2012 and the long count calendar, they had these cyclical calendars. And so with the Mayan long count calendar, they had several smaller cycles all embedded within a larger cycle. And the end of the long count calendar was simply the end of that larger cycle and the beginning of a new one. So it wasn't like the end, a hard stop. It was, things still just kept going, but it was the beginning of a new cycle. Some might call it the beginning of a great year, and those little miniature cycles within it being like a great month within the great year. The Mayans themselves, during the peak of their civilization, they considered themselves to be living in the fourth creation. And then when the long count calendar ended on December 21st, 2012, which was the winter solstice, then we entered into the fifth creation. The fourth creation ended, so in a sense the world did end, but a new one sprung up spontaneously to take its place. And that would mean that we are currently in what the Mayans consider the fifth creation. So that means that the earth was created and destroyed 4 times before now, and now we're in the fifth one. And that we lived through that fourth destruction and the fifth creation. This relates back to the more Western concept, or the more European, I should say, more European concept, which actually goes back to the Sumerians and the Babylonians, of these zodiacal ages or Aeons. So you may have heard that song This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Age of Aquarius. That song is referring to the zodiacal ages. So, the age of Aquarius is the new age that we are entering into. Some people say that we've already hit that tipping point, that we are in the age of Aquarius now. Some people say that we haven't quite got there yet, but we're almost there. But different people have set different dates, and a lot of them were very political, because they're like, well, Crowley said that it happened during his life, right? Aleister Crowley, he said that the new Aeon of Horus began, and that he was the prophet of the new Aeon of Horus. And so he had a political reason for picking that date, right? And it was related to his reception of a received text, a scripture in a sense, right? So he had a very political reason, very personal reason to select that as the date. But I think that for me, a workable date would be 2012, December 21st. And I like to say that that was the date, because it just seemed like these concepts just hit a real crescendo in the zeitgeist at that point. And it really does feel like there was some sort of major shift that happened, because things definitely feel different from before 2012 to after 2012. It seems like there's some big major difference. The previous age, just so you're understanding this, would have been the age of Pisces. Now, some people have related this to the idea of Christianity being the dominant influence in a lot of the world for the past couple thousand years. And that's generally how long a great month in the zodiacal age system is. So a great year is one full cycle of every one of the zodiacal signs having its own age. And they're roughly a couple thousand years, a bit more than 2,000 years per age. And so not only have we gone from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, but we've started a brand new great year instead, and not just a new great month. So it's a full new cycle. Now, this concept, I could keep going on about it for a long time, but essentially there's a new set of parameters, or a new overarching influence over the nature of reality, one could say, during that age. And for those people who can adapt to it quicker, they're going to have an edge. They're going to be more successful at manifesting their desires under this new influence. And I can't really get into it any further, because I don't want this to be a super long video. But I do talk about this type of subject a lot, so you can check out my older videos on my channel, or you can subscribe to my channel now, and then new videos that come out about subjects such as this and related topics, you'll get notified for. And until next time, everybody, stay lucid.